Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to my week 25 and 26 wrap up, which I know June has been a little out of whack and I can't promise there won't be more weeks like this during the summer where I'm busy on the weekends or going on fun trips. It just happens. If you didn't see by now, last weekend I was in Utah visiting my big book sis Crystal, and I also got to meet Sophie Lark in person, which was wow. So I have a travel vlog for that. I talk a little bit about reading, but mostly it's about getting to go on that trip, and it was really fun. So that means that we have another double week wrap up, and it ends up being okay because the week that I was going to go on the trip, I hardly read anything. I read like 5 books that week because I was just so excited that focusing was very difficult. But before we get into all of those, we do have some new channel members and patrons to welcome. June, definitely I saw a decline in some memberships and support with patrons, so that was like a little bit concerning, just because, you know, July 15th is where my like 90-day goal is at. But I do know that in like trends with just like year over year for me, that July and August are usually the lowest month, along with January. January is always a real low because after like the holidays, I feel like, I don't know what it is, but anyway, just thought I would share that. But we still have some new people to welcome in that I'm very thankful for. So we have a new channel member, Maria Zeladon, who joined at the Faded Friend level. So welcome, Maria. I'm so happy to have you here. I hope you enjoy your early access to content. And we have our next Faded Friend hangout coming in like a week and a half, I think. So definitely watch my community page for more on that. And then we have 5 new patrons to mention. We do have Lisa Tully, Ashley Maggio, Melissa Charity, Helen Salisbury, and yeah, I think that's everyone that I needed to mention for this one. So thank you everyone for choosing to support me. If you would like to know more about my channel memberships and Patreon and what's available, I have levels starting as low as $1.99 for channel memberships and $3 for Patreon. I do this full time. It is my livelihood at this point. So any support you can give is just very encouraging to me, and it helps me keep living the dream, right? So let's go ahead and dive into the books because we got a lot of them to chat about. I of course have my Chromebook right here, so I will be looking down at my notes because the first one that we're starting with, where are we at? Is actually, I did a reread of Lessons in Corruption, which I totally forgot to grab, but it's right behind me, and I'll also put up a picture here. This was a reread for a annotated book by 2 patrons, actually. Both asked for this book. It's so crazy to me doing this month by month, and I've actually added some spots for annotated books at the beginning of July. I did, and they filled up right away. And it's funny to me, like, which books that people pick that are the same, because it'll just feel like so out of the blue, but then people will pick them. So if you don't know about this book, this is the first book in the Fallen Men motorcycle series by Gianna Darling, and this one is a reverse age gap, or that means an age gap with an older woman. I don't know why we say reverse age gap, like the woman can never be older, but that's just the colloquial term that's used at this point. But we have our heroine who is in her late 20s, and she is a teacher. And at the beginning of this book, she has this interesting encounter with she doesn't even talk to the person, but she sees this young man who has these tattoos and dirty blonde hair, and she sees him across a parking lot. I think she's at a grocery store or a gas station, I can't remember. And seeing him just gives her this kind of moment of clarity. She's actually been in a 10-year-long marriage with this older man who has just really been like stifling her and really wants her to fit into a certain box, and she doesn't want to fit in that box anymore. You know, she doesn't want to be in it anymore. So she goes home that day and she asks for a divorce. And then we skip forward. I think it's either like 9 months or a year. I can't fully remember. But she is trying to, live her life in Entrance. I think they're in British Columbia is like where they are. And she is like out one night and she runs into this same young man, and they end up having this like really interesting encounter. And then she discovers that he is going to her school and he's in her English classes, and he is the son of the motorcycle leader in this area, and she is kind of horrified, but she's very much attracted to him, and it begins it begins the romance between the two of them, which a lot of people have a lot of feelings about. So it's very interesting. So it was very interesting to reread this book. I will say that this time around, it wasn't quite as like exciting as I remember it being. I feel like I just didn't quite connect with it the same way that I did the first time around. There are some situations with Cress and King sexually that happen in the classroom that made me extremely uncomfortable this time around. And I couldn't quite like fall into them the way I did before. But it was still a good time, and I gave it 4 stars this time around, and it was a 4 on the spice scale. So it was still a good time to revisit it. But yeah, I definitely feel a little differently about it this time than I have before. Next up, I read Merciless Saints by Michelle Hurd. I was wanting to read this is the Saints series, formerly called Monarch Academy, but because now the series she's writing is the Sinner series, and it connects kind of with the Monarch Academy, that series was kind of rebranded the Saints. And in this one, we get introduced to, let me see where their name is, Winter, who is from a mafia family, and there is this place called Monarch Academy where you can go to be trained to be either like an assassin or a protector or those things. So it's a mafia school type thing, but you don't necessarily have to be like a young person who's going there, but it is a place that's supposed to be neutral ground and all that jazz. So when she's there, she meets Damien, who is training to be an assassin there. And what happens is that whenever there's like a graduating class of people there, they get like auctioned off, like their first jobs get auctioned off. And so his first auction, like the auction where he's going to be graduating, is only after like a month of her being there. But anyway, we get to see their interactions at school. And then when it comes to the night of his graduation and there's an auction, her dad is actually there for this because he's the head of a mafia, but he's in a lot of danger because they're in a war with, other mafias. But again, Monarch Academy is supposed to be neutral ground. And when some very interesting things, which I don't want to spoil, go down at this graduation, Winter and Damien end up in a forced proximity situation. I'm trying to be very vague about this because I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, I very much enjoyed this. I really liked the pull that they felt to each other right away. I definitely still saw some of the sparks that I love about the Sinner series, which I'm currently enjoying. But I did give this one 4 stars, and it had like a 3 on the spice scale, and there was trigger warnings for death of family members and violence in this one. Then I read June 1st by Jennifer Hartman. This was on my TBR for June. Seemed like the perfect one, and now I was warned about this going in. I had an idea of what I was going to be getting into. Like all Jennifer Hartman's, like, just know you are in for heartbreak, you're in for pain. That's how it's going to be when you get into it. And this one, we start off with Brant, who, when he is 6 years old, his father murders his mother and then kills himself, and he's left all alone. And his next door neighbors also happen to have like his best friend. They have a little boy, and they've just had a little girl, and her name is June. And so he gets taken in by this family, and they actually end up adopting him. And he immediately has this very interesting connection with June. And he just loves this little girl. And there was nothing weird about that. It never felt weird when they are like little kids. Like, it's not that kind of thing. Like, he just feels connected to her. He feels like she's his person. And so when he is little, when he's 6, you know, and she's just a baby, when she cries at night, he wants to soothe her. And when she's little, he makes sure she gets brought along on his adventures with her brother. And the parents, they very much, like, they totally bring him into their family. They love him. They want to be his parents, but he's always very adamant that he's not their son. And I can't imagine how that would hurt them. But I also love how particularly the mother is like, no, we understand. Like, I'm not trying to replace your mom. But unbeknownst to little Brant, like, the mother, she knew that things were dangerous for her in the relationship she was in, and she wanted her son to have someone to take care of him if anything were to happen to her. And so that mother, this new caretaker for him, she does everything in her power to be a good mother to him, and by all accounts, they are very good parents to him. So this story then goes about the next, 22 years of life. A good chunk of this book takes place when we're all like children still. And when June eventually starts to be attracted to Brant is very afraid of anything going across the line and ruining the closeness that they're able to have. And he would never want to disrespect the people who have been his parents, because here's the thing, he doesn't want them to call him his son, but that's more because he doesn't feel worthy of being their son, not because he so much wants to honor like his father, who is a murderer. He doesn't feel that he's like good enough to be these people's kid. But anyway, I don't want to go into full spoilers for this. So this was a very like painful book to read. I mean, there are literally, it's broken into like the first tragedy, the second tragedy, the third tragedy. Like, there's always tragedy. And so that ended up being kind of my biggest complaint for this one. And also just like how I tried to explain this book is that this book, instead of it being like women's fiction, which is what we would call if like, it's a romance, but it ends up being more about like the woman's journey. And I don't know what to call that when it's happening to a man, but it really felt more like romantic fiction. There's still an HEA, there's still smut, there's still all of that, but like for me, the romance wasn't what was so important between June and Brant. It was the connection, and it was this family he was a part of. And then, even like the mother realizing that the connection between June and Brant was like more than a brother and sister. Like, he never saw her as a sister. He saw her as someone he wanted to protect, but for him, once it's a more romantic thing, like, he's never seen her as a sister. But of course, everyone else is going to see it that way because he literally was adopted by them, So anyway, this book just, it's a complete angst fest. So if you really like the tragic story, you really like the angsty level, it's totally there. And it's a beautiful story overall, like I said, but there wasn't a moment of this book where I was having fun or was enjoying what I was reading. And that's a big part of this for me. There's a few of my friends on Instagram that the way that they rate their reading is, instead of saying like, I rated this, they rate their reading experience, because I say this, I'm an emotional reader, and that's how I rate the book. Like, I very rarely will be like, oh, analytically, this is a good book. Like, I'm not a critic, I'm a reviewer, I'm an enjoyer. And for me, the enjoyment level of this was a 3.5, probably less than that, but I rounded it up to a 4 because, again, like, even though I'm an emotional writer, I'm also not going to trash an author because what they write, like, isn't working for me. But yeah, my reading experience for this was low. Like, this was very painful book, but again, it's beautiful, like, I'm not saying I would never recommend this book. This one's definitely like a forbidden romance. It's definitely taboo in the sense of like situationally taboo is something I call that, you know. But yeah, I gave it 3.5 stars that way, and it's a 3 on the spice scale. And it has a lot of trigger warnings that are that very like real kind of pain. You know, there is obviously death of parents. There's also more deaths. Like, I don't want to just give the trigger warning that like, oh, the parents die, because that happens in like the prologue of this, right? There are other deaths in this, so be prepared. There's PTSD. It's very angsty and painful. So there we go. We're moving on. We got other stuff to talk about, but I read it. Next, I read Gravity by Sarah Kate. This was also on my TBR. I have now almost read all of her books. I don't plan to read her reverse harems because I don't like reverse harems, so why would I set myself up for failure? But I knew Gravity was going to be a love triangle. It's an MFM love triangle with like a father, a son, and a girl. So I knew I wasn't going to like enjoy this one. But I also know a lot of my friends love this one, and I love Sarah Kate. So I was reading Gravity so that I could read Freefall, which I did end up doing, because Freefall is an MMF, and it is like, there's bisexual characters in there, so that worked for me. But with Gravity, there was this tragedy that happened a couple years ago where our heroine, Zara, lost her sister, and Alistair lost a son, and Nash lost a brother. And so Nash and Zara, their brother and sister, were dating. That was happening, and there was an accident and they died. And in the meantime, Zara has become a stripper, and Nash has remained a recluse on the family private island, and he hasn't left in the, I think it's 2 years since it happened. So Alistair shows up at the strip club that Zara works at and offers her $1 million to come stay on the island and try to get Nash to wake up, because he knows that Nash and Zara had like feelings for each other, and he thinks that maybe something will work. And she's like, are you literally paying me to sleep with your son? And he's like, I'm not paying you to do that. Nash might think you're going to be sleeping with him, but that's up to you. Like, I want you to come and stay. And so she agrees to do this because she would love $1 million for spending 6 months with Nash. So this ends up being Zara and Nash really kind of going at it. There's lots of sex happening, but also Alistair has had secret feelings for Zara for a long time, and so there's stuff happening between them. And there's even some situations where all three of them are in the same room, because Nash, he actually likes to be competitive in his sexual endeavors. So that's interesting. And yeah, I just didn't really love Nash in this one, but I also knew that I wouldn't, because really his like full character arc starts in Gravity and continues into Freefall. So for everyone who's going to ask me, you do have to read Freefall, or Gravity to read Freefall, which is why I had to do it. Like, it's why I did it, even though I didn't really want to read a love triangle. And I actually gave that one 3 stars, and it was a 3.5 on the spice scale, because I felt like by the time Alistair and Zara got to really connect, there wasn't a lot of time for their connection. It was about like Nash and Zara, and then like it's Alistair and Zara, and then like it was over. But there was also some sex scenes in here that were just so improbable that they're supposed to be. Like, literally, I've been on an interview with Sarah Kate, like she knew what she was doing by writing these crazy scenes. But I was like irritated with the characters for being so dangerous. But that's just me. It's just me. A lot of people love this. A lot of people love triangles, and it works. Love triangles just don't work for me. I want MMFs. So, trigger warnings for that one were grief and death in Gravity. So then I read Freefall, and this one is about Nash, and he has, by the end of Gravity, he has kind of snapped out of his seclusion, so he's starting to work with the family business again, and I believe he's in Amsterdam, and he meets up with his father's business associate, whose name is Ellis. And throughout this book, so like I don't want to spoil it, but I also kind of need to tell you what happened to like explain the book. But Ellis and Nash start their relationship by like they share women, and then there are some times where it's just the two of them together, and they are kind of together for a good point. And when Ellis wants things to be more serious, Nash freaks out and he's like, I'm not gay. This was just a fun time and I'm over this. And he really kind of breaks Ellis's heart and he runs away again because Nash is good at running. And then we have Hannah, who we've met Hannah in the first book. She is a ballet dancer, and that's like how we meet her. Zara like goes to the ballet at one point in that book, and she's become like, she's a friend of the family, and she ends up needing to take a break from her career and from some drama, and she goes to stay on this island. And then Ellis, after a while of being, you know, brokenhearted, he has some business that he's going to be helping the company with, and so he goes to stay on this island too. So all three of them end up on the island, and Nash had really hurt Ellis, so there's that tension between them, and Hannah's attracted to both of them, and she slowly starts to unravel what had happened with them when they were in Amsterdam. So I think that's enough of like stumbling over it, but this one is an MMF. This one is another situation, and part of the reason I wanted to read this so bad is because I read Give Me More in May or June, May, whenever, and I loved it so much, and I wanted to see how else she wrote an MMF before. So this one, I can definitely see some of the shades of Give Me More like in this, especially with the hero who isn't ready to accept his bisexuality and what that means for him. He really doesn't want to accept any kind of relationship. So it's not even just specific to if he's bisexual or not. So anyway, I very much did enjoy this one more. So this one was a 4-star for me, and it was a 4 on the spice scale. And there weren't really any triggers in here. All right, then I got to read the new release, A Company of Fiends by Catherine Moon. I have been eagerly anticipating this book, and I hope that the paperback is going to be available soon. The last time I checked, I didn't see it, so I'll keep checking. But this is the follow-up to A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor, and man, it's so different. It's so different, particularly how the heroine is different for me, okay? Like, there's a lot about A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor that is just fun, and that was a book that I've given 5 stars to, mostly because it was bonkers, and it was one of the very few reverse harems I liked where the men weren't all fucking each other, but they had this really interesting bond, and the way that they were bonded, like some of them were together, there were some MMF scenes, and there were some men that liked being together more than some of the others did, but I just liked that. And A Company of Fiends takes place at the Monster Theater, where we find our heroine Hazel, who has been working there for 8 years, and so she has sex with the different monsters, you know, pretty much every night for different theatrical things. And so she ends up she has 5 to 7 different monsters that she's with at different times. She herself is actually half nymph. I literally actually took notes about this one so that I could talk about it. I should find where I put that, because there were literally so much. I was like, I'm gonna need to have to track this time. So there was Ronan, who is an imp, and he has wings and a prehensile tail, and I believe he is red colored. I don't know. I'm just going off of the descriptions and how well I paid attention. And Ronan and Hazel have known each other a while. They do quite a few scenes together, and they actually have this very deep friendship that is starting to have like more go on. But Hazel's always been very resistant to that because she doesn't want to like have anything more with someone. So what's different about Hazel too, I should say, is this book very much read as like, I mean, she's a sex worker because she's, you know, performing for, you know, and having sex with all these different monsters. And she's very much the character of like, I've been a sex worker for a long time. This isn't necessarily exciting anymore, but like I do find the work rewarding sometimes. Whereas like when you read the first book, it was our heroine just starting sex work. And so she very much was high on just the fact that she could fuck all these all these different creatures And it was very much like a high for her, whereas Hazel is a little more resigned to it. But she's starting to feel more with Ronan than she has before, and so she's a little wary of falling for him. Then we have Hunter, who we end up meeting, and he is a patron of the company, and he wants to have a relationship with Hazel. And so he's an orc. He in the beginning like glamours himself as this more like diminutive man, because there's like glamours that the different monsters can have, and he wants to he wants to be her patron. And the people that she works for, like, it's up to the women if they would like to have a patron that they specifically, you know, pleasure or like go on dates with or are kept by them or whatever. But it is highly encouraged by the company, obviously, because, you know, there's that. And Hunter, yeah, he's an orc, so he also has these very fancy beads in his genitalia, which are basically like piercings, which is amazing. Then we have Ninius, who is a giant. I don't fully know what he is. He's been around for a very long time at the theater, and he is a very long-living creature, and he has 6 arms and 3 eyes is what I got. I'm sorry if I mess any of these up. And there was a point where him and Hazel almost had a thing, and then he rejected her, so she literally doesn't speak to him, and they've been very like stiff with each other for many years. Then we meet Constantine, who is a monster that is sent to be a special act with the theater, and he can turn into a they. So he's called Constantine, and he's a Gemini, and so he can split himself into 2 parts, who then become Con, who has the power of pain, and Anton, who has the power of pleasure. And so Hazel ends up being the actress who's elected to work with him because she can handle the pain and the pleasure that he gives. And when they have their acts together, she literally, like, she is so afraid but in love with it, because it's just this like complete sensory overload. So there's literally 3 beings that we deal with and interact with when we deal with Constantine, because there's Constantine when he's both, you know, he's a Gemini demon, so when he's both, and then when he splits into 2. And this actually leads to some situations where we have the 2 of them in a sex scene, and they can actually fuck each other. So we were like, is this twincest? Are they twins? Is it just self-pleasure? What is this? You don't have to figure it out. It's a monster fucking book. You don't need to know. And then we finally get Jude, who is a half-fae police officer. And he, in the beginning, we don't know this about him, and he is actually looking into, there are some girls who work at the theater who are turning up dead. So anyway, now I've introduced all the characters to you. I know that's a lot. There is a bit of a mystery running through this story. It is not, it mostly is used as a device to, you know, get our people closer to each other. I don't know, but I like how Catherine Moon does this always, because she makes each of the men like very distinct, while at the same time, where are you? Well, at the same time, there's just, there were some great scenes in this. So I really liked what was happening in this one. It is like furthering the plot of the villain we know about from the first book, but you could read this one without having read the other one, because anything pertinent, you will get told it. And we do have a cameo of that heroine and her harem in this book as well. And there is already, the 3rd book has been announced, which is called like the something of Kings. I can't remember, but I gave this 5 stars, and it was a 5 on the spice scale. And some of the kinks / trigger warnings, I will tell you, there is pet play in this, probably the best pet play I've ever read. I'm not gonna lie, it's not my favorite thing, but the way it's used in here, I love it. There was violence and death, there's pain play, there's lots of monster fucking, and there was definitely MMF and MMMF and MM, like, we get lots of swords crossing in different ways. So loved it. Then I read Twisted Lies. This just came out the other day. This is the fourth and final book in the Twisted series by Anna Huang. I won't talk too much about this one because there was a lot about it that was really kept as a mystery. I will say that some of the like tension I was feeling about this before reading it was how this was going to be like the darkest one. I would say in regards to darkness level, it's kind of on par with Twisted Love, but this hero was very excellent. I very much enjoyed Christian. This book starts as kind of like a forced proximity / fake dating. Stella has a stalker. She's living in Christian's building. We found that out, like that happened in Twisted Hate, that she ended up living in his building, and she actually waters his plants to get a discount on her rent. And Christian is a security expert, as well as like he runs a company, and he's very obsessed with Stella, so I'll say that. She is a social media influencer and like fashion blogger, and she ends up wanting to help boost her career because she hasn't been able to get over a million followers. And so Christian agrees to be her like fake boyfriend as long as she doesn't ever show his face. So she starts taking photos, like strategic photos of like his hand on her knee or things like that. It was really good. And he wants someone to take to events. So it starts out as that. When her stalker starts to escalate, he moves her into his guest room because his apartment is the safest penthouse like in the building. So then it becomes forced proximity as well. So yeah, I really love this. It is probably tied with Twisted Games as my favorite in the series because Twisted Games just has a very special place in my heart just for what it was. But I think this is the best written in the series. I think it was well thought out. This one is a slow burn, okay, and it's a long book. But Anna Huang wrote beautiful tension. It's great. Like, this is a 5-star book. I loved it. If you love the other ones in the series, you'll like this too. But again, it is long and is a slow burn. So just enjoy the sexual tension, okay? Because it's good. But yeah, it's going to take you a little bit to get to anything more than that. But hero Christian is very obsessive, very protective, and the things that he's thinking about her, the possessive thoughts he's having, are excellent. So I gave this one 5 stars, and it's a 3.5. Nope, it's a 3 on my spice scale. Wait, where am I at? I gave it a 3.5. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. It is a 3.5. The trigger warnings for this are, there is a character in here with Alzheimer's. That was not one of the triggers that Anna had listed. She has the other triggers like listed on her website. Like, there's a QR code you can scan to know them. And I actually thought that like the Alzheimer's one is kind of a bigger one for me. I don't know, because it's one thing when you hear like stalking and like there's violence in this book, and those are serious, but I don't know, Alzheimer's and dementia are an issue that I feel like is a lot more personal for a lot of people. So I just wanted to put that out there, but really enjoyed this release. Then I read Phoebe by Minerva Spencer, which I've just talked in depth about in my monthly wrap up. So I'm going to keep it quick in this one because I literally gushed about that book for 15 minutes. So I will put my monthly wrap up right here because that's the first place that I talked about this book. So this is the start of the Bellamy Sister series by Minerva Spencer / SM La Violette. This is about 20-year-old Phoebe, and she is the like second youngest child of this like poor gentry who the father spent a lot of their money, and they need to rent out their estate to literally keep it from being repossessed by the crown, basically, because he's in debt. And so we have our hero Paul, who is a like working class or I think he's an earl, but like his family got their title based on wealth and like the amount of land they owned, and less on like, you know, it didn't come down the line. And our hero Paul is the one who ends up renting their home, which the family's living on a small cottage just a little ways away. And he ends up renting this home, and he brings his bastard daughter and the girl's mother, who is his ex-mistress, to live in the home. And he's very open about doing this, and it very much puts everyone off, including Phoebe, because again, she's 20, okay, he's like 36, and she's just never met someone who's that like bold and kind of rude about telling his history, but you know, he's never been treated well by the gentry, and so when he wants to shock this family is kind of the thing, and he definitely does, and he gets him on the wrong foot with Phoebe, and he kind of wants to marry one of this family's kids just to make this stuffy family like bow to him, basically, because they don't like him, but they want his money and they want him to keep their home together. So he's kind of thinking about doing it. And Phoebe, she has 3 older sisters, any of which she's afraid will be forced into marriage with him. So Phoebe actually goes to his home unaccompanied and asks him not to marry her sisters. And he's just so taken aback by this woman that she would be so like bold to do this. And he has overheard her before say what an upstart, what a git that he is, and how rude he is. And he thinks it's funny, but he also, again, wants to stick it to them a little bit because his pride was hurt. And so he looks at this girl who he thinks is like, I don't know, he's very attracted to her like a spark, you know, as well as he thinks her body's very beautiful too. Like, there's that, let's not pretend. And so he literally tells her, he's like, okay, I won't marry your sisters on one condition. And she's like, really? Okay, what is it? And he says, if you marry me instead. So Phoebe ends up being the one who is sacrificing herself to Paul, and she doesn't quite know the sensuous and exciting and demanding relationship she's getting into. And I love this. There is miscommunication in this book, but it's my favorite kind, because it's the kind where when we miscommunicate, we then have a discussion about it, and there's apologies shared, and there is steamy goodness, and there is mutual pining within a marriage for each other. And I love all of those things. And I gave this 5 stars, and as I said, it's one of my favorite books of the month, and you can go watch this if you want more in depth on it. But I gave it 5 stars, and it was a 3.5. So this was an age gap, and it is a significant age gap for a historical. I've had people ask me for age gap historicals, and I'm like, most historicals are age gap, but this one, it's literally called an age gap historical. That's what I just forgot her name, Minerva Spencer, says on the cover. So it's age gap, it's an arranged marriage, and a little bit of a coerced marriage too. And he's also a single parent. So there we go. I gave it 5 stars, and it was 3 on the spice scale. There is death and violence, and then there is terminal illness, because, as we said, his ex-mistress, well, I didn't say this, she's actually dying, and that's part of the reason why he brings her to live with him, and not just because he's that bold of a guy. Like, he's no longer with this mistress sexually, but he didn't want to tear his daughter away from her dying mother. So he's such a good guy. So there's a trigger warning for that. Then, of course, I finished Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. This is for the SJM along, which has been going along just swimmingly. There is actually a 2-hour long book chat for this book. I, of course, gave it 5 stars. There's not really any steam in this one. We get a little bit of, maybe a little bit of dry humping in this one, but that's about as close as we get. This is book 4 in the Throne of Glass series. Absolutely fantastic. If you'd like to know our more in-depth breakdown of this book, you can check out the playlist I've created of all the SJM along titles. Then I wanted to read a couple shorter books, so I read Instinct by Alison Blackwood. This was only 110 pages, and it was recommended by a viewer. I put up my book rec form. Well, my book rec form is always available, but I had about 60 new entries on that video that I put out for it. And I looked up a bunch of the novellas because I was kind of in a reading slump after reading like 5 stars in a row. I didn't know what to do next. So this is a prehistoric romance. It's just a little shorty, like I said. If you liked Transcendence, but didn't want to read Roe after I totally trashed it, you should check this one out. Although this is 2 prehistoric people, a woman and a man, and they don't have names. In the beginning, the female calls the male stranger because they meet at her favorite lake when she's there with her pup. Her pup, he's just called Pup, and he slowly begins to charm her. And then once they are together, she calls him mate. and it was just cute. It was sweet. It was right there. I gave this 4 stars, and it was a 2.5 on the spice scale, and there are no real trigger warnings for this. It was great. Then I finished The Emerald Lily by Juliet Cross. This is the 4th and final book in the Vampire Blood series. Guys, if you haven't read the series yet, you are missing out, okay? This is fantasy vampire retellings of fairy tales, and there is also an overarching story, so you do want to start with The Black Lily. The Black Lily, was like a Cinderella retelling, except Cinderella goes to the ball to kill the prince and instead steals his heart. It's wonderful. This one is kind of a not Beauty and the Beast. This one is a Sleeping Beauty retelling, and our heroine, Wilhelmina Dragomir, she is awakened from her blood sleep, which this sleep is literally she's giving 1 drop of blood, I think like a week, to like keep her alive, but she cannot do anything. And she's supposed to be given in marriage to this very evil person, this very evil vampire prince who's just a total toad and disgusting and horrible. And she gets rescued by Captain of the Blood Guard, Mikhail Romanov, who is sent to rescue her and bring her to like the Black Lily team and like keep her safe. So the Black Lily is like the rebellion that's going on. And so they immediately have this crazy attraction to each other, but he knows that she's a princess and she's meant for really great things and not meant for him. But yet at the same time, like they just cannot stay away from each other. So this was amazing. It wraps up the whole quad, the whole quartet, and I just loved it so much. These books are absolutely amazing. Juliet Cross is fantastic. I love her. And I have more of her books to talk about in this as well. We got to keep going. Then I got to read an arc of Princess by Claire Kent. This is finally continuing the Kindled series by Claire Kent, which was on pause for quite a while. Claire Kent is also known as Noelle Adams, and so she'd been putting out more books under that name, but she's coming back this year with 3 more books in the Kindle series, and I was able to get on her ARC team for this, although this is also available on NetGalley. So if you've read Last Light and you want to read this series, you could probably get this on NetGalley now if you wanted to. So this is another like post disaster type story. We get to find out more of like the scientific side of what's going on, because our heroine in this one, her name is, where do I have it? Oops. Her name is Olivia. She is the daughter of this very wealthy like billionaire, and he had actually bought a spot in this missile silo that had been turned into like a safe house, and there are a bunch of different families, wealthy families, that all bought spots here as well. And so she gets picked up from school, she's 17, and taken because there is a asteroid about to hit Earth. And this is a thing, like we've seen the after effects of it, but now we're getting to go back to the beginning, and we see her, and it says that it's 5 years from the present time. So she goes there, and we get these different snippets of time. And the man who had picked her up there, his name is Grant, and he works for the company that runs this, and he's kind of like her bodyguard for that little bit. And then throughout the years, he becomes her, like, he teaches her self-defense, teaches her how to use weapons, and eventually when they open the silo, they are brought up against the dangers of what's been happening, which we know a little bit about if you've read the other books in the series. So very excited. We find out who the other couples are going to be about as well, but this is only about 200 pages. It's not super long, but I just love how she writes disaster stories, and I love survival stories. So this was so good, and it's called Princess because that's what Grant calls her. So this was a 5-star book for me, and it was 3 on the spice scale, and there's trigger warnings for death of a parent and characters in peril. And then the last little book that I snuck in at the end of June, which I still have I have July books to talk about here too, but I read the Supplicant by Sierra Simone. This was another one that was put on my viewer recommendation list, which is awesome because I was wanting to read this book when it came out, and then I just never did. So this is a second chance novella. It's only 90 pages, and it's about our heroine, Charlie, who was left at the altar by her fiance, who was her professor, and they had had a romance while she was in school, and he actually leaves her at the altar to protect both of their careers, because if they end up getting married, he basically will lose his job and she will never work in their field because everyone will think she fucked her way to the top. And now it is 4 years later, and it seems that everything that he did, like breaking her heart, it didn't really do either of them any good. So this was quick. I gave it 4 stars. Was it really? Maybe not, but novellas are hard, but Sierra Simone can pack a lot into a quick one. And it was 2.5 on the spice scale. All right, now we're into the books I read in July so far, which is only 2 days worth. I read By Virtue I Fall, or In Virtue I Fall. It's By Virtue I Fall by Cora Riley. It was funny because I had a bunch of people ask me if I was going to read it, and I was already reading it. This book is about Anna Cavallaro, so this is Dante and Valentina's daughter, and it starts when she is getting a bodyguard, and his name is Santino, and he is her bodyguard over the next many years. And when she is 18, when she's 13, she's told who her arranged marriage is going to be with. It's going to be with this guy named Clifford, who his family's very wealthy and will be running for office, and they want to get in with politics and everything. And Anna's okay. And when she is 17 going on 18, there's this fashion program in Paris that she wants to do that's going to last 3 years, and she convinces her father and mother to let her go, but that means Santino has to go too. And Anna very much wants to seduce Santino, and Santino is I'm going to be able to resist. Well, of course he doesn't resist, and they begin an affair that lasts for 3 years. Well, not really an affair, because Clifford encourages her to have sex with other people because he's not from the mafia, and he's I don't want to be your first. I don't want the pressure of me having been able to live a life and you just waiting around for me to, be your Prince Charming. And she's okay, fair. And so she wants to find people to sleep with, but really she just wants to sleep with Santino. Okay, now I'm going to say it. This was Gossip Girl with barely any mafia in it at all. Anna was very reckless with Santino's life. She did not take it seriously that if Dante caught them fucking each other, Santino would be killed. But also, Santino wasn't taking this very seriously either. He's taking it seriously up to a certain point, and then he's just oh well, it'll be worth it. And then, we skip 3 years until it's time for her to get married. And that's where we're at. So this book was extremely frustrating for me. I don't know what's happening with Cora Riley. I had many discussions with other friends who used to love her books. And I will say, I will never not be completely in love with Twisted Emotions and Twisted Pride. I will always love those books. But I'm very disappointed with the way that she's done with these. Now, she said in her Facebook page there will be some books in the series that are darker than others, and it isn't just that I want them to be dark. I want the emotions back that I've been missing. I've been missing the emotions that I want, and it bothers me. So this was a 3.5 star for me. It was probably less than that after talking with my friends, but I don't want to trash it. I don't have a desire to do that. I just don't enjoy her books anymore. And am I going to keep reading them? Yes. I am. I know. So I'm not going to make such a big deal about it that it's a shock when I pick her up again. I just now have a very different frame of reference to put her books in. You know what I mean? I'm very much putting them in I can't look away, not I can't wait to read it. So I'm just putting that out there. And my trigger warning is literally for a heroine who is too stupid to live. And I'm very disappointed that Dante and Valentina's daughter is so dumb. Okay? All right. Moving on. I read an arc of The Butcher's Wife by Sam Crescent. This book is coming out in just a couple of days. It popped up on NetGalley, and I really loved the blurb. so I went for it, okay? This one is a novella. It's only 120 pages, but it felt like a complete story. I've only read one other Sam Crescent, and I actually didn't like it. And I'm glad I didn't remember that I didn't like it, because I knew I'd read a Sam Crescent before, but I didn't remember how I felt about it. And I was like, this looks fun. And it was an instant, like, I got approved right away for it. So I read it in like one sitting. It was delightful. So The Butcher's Wife is an age gap arranged marriage, and we start like at the wedding day. So, you know, we start right into it. And we have our heroine, Valentina, who is 22, and she is like an outcast because when she was 18, she was engaged to the capo's son, who is a complete sleaze. But she had been kidnapped because she was his fiance and tortured. She wasn't raped, but she was tortured a lot, okay? Like she's covered in scars because they beat her. And Giovanni, also known as the Butcher, was the one who rescued her 3 years ago, and he brutally killed the people who were abusing her, and he brought her home. And he watched her be turned into a pariah for something that wasn't her fault, and it's always hurt him. So he recently reached, like, I don't know if it was a special anniversary, but he's worked for the capo for 20 plus years. He's very close with him, and he has never married. And so the capo says, pick any of our unmarried girl women and she'll be your wife. And he immediately picks Valentina, which pisses off the capo's son, who is like, what's so interesting about my castaways? And he's very suspicious about this, but whatever. And Valentina is terrified because she's being married off to the Butcher, and she doesn't want any man to touch her, and she's very traumatized. But from minute one, Giovanni is the most protective, loving, adoring husband. It was almost hurt my teeth. I loved how precious he was with her. Does he really get down to it right away? Yes. Like, there's no easing your way into sexy time with him, but oh boy, does he get things moving in a glorious way. So this sweet, sweet little preciousness was great. And it felt like a full story. And I think it feels like a full story because Valentina doesn't really need to be convinced into loving him. Like, he puts his best foot forward with her right away and is immediately just like so adoring with her because he knows what a treasure she is, and he's been wanting to protect her for quite a while. So it works for them right away. So it worked. Then I read an arc of Bright Like Midnight by Juliet Cross. This is coming out June 15th, I think, for whatever. This is the first book in her Beauville series. This was a sweet little small town contemporary romance. And if you are a theater nerd, you will like this a lot. So we have Betty, who is a teacher in this town, and we have Bennett, who is a business owner and a bit on the like wealthier end, and they end up as leads in a community play together. And Betty doesn't like this because she's holding a grudge against Bennett for something that happened in their past that Bennett doesn't know what she's holding a grudge about. She soon tells him. But this is very low angst. This was very sweet. I had a great time reading it. It was very sexy. There were some good times. I gave this one a 4.5 star. I think that the ending conflict was a little bit rushed, and I was a little disappointed in how the heroine reacted to some things. But the hero, oh my gosh, his dirty mouth and his dirty sexiness, like, fantastic. It was great. So 3.5 on the spice scale for this. So then I finished, I told you I read a lot of Juliet Cross. I'm working my way through her backlist as well as her new titles. So Dragon in the Blood is book 2 in the Veil of Star series. This one is about Vala Moonring, who is an assassin for the Order of the Morgan Guard. And she's ordered on an expedition through the wastelands. And she gets partnered with a Nightwing security operative, Con Rowanflame, and they end up being heartstring mates with each other, and Vala just really doesn't want to be contained in that way, and so she's very resistant to whatever could be between them. So yeah, that was a little bit frustrating. I won't lie about this one. it was getting under my skin a little bit how much she was pushing him away, especially when you find your mate. Like for the men, it can be like painful if they're not with their woman, and he's this perfectly wonderful man and she's just very much like, you're gonna take my independence. And I was like, I don't know, it just doesn't quite fit with some of the things Juliet writes now. But I still love this world, and I love the Morgans is like what they're called. So, but this one was a 3.5 star for me, and it also did not have the trademark Juliet spice that I wanted. So it was a 2 on the spice scale for me. And then the final book that I finished, let's get this one done. I read Mercy by Deborah Anastasia. This book was recommended by Bree. I saw it in one of her vlogs that she'd read this book, and I was very intrigued. I really liked this cover. And this one is about like a stalker, and he's also an assassin, and he's also a cinnamon roll. Okay, like I don't know how else to say it. He has inked like a skeleton over his entire body, because if people were going to look at him, he wanted them to be looking at him because they were afraid, not because they were disgusted. But when Phoenix is his name, when he's a little boy, his father murders his mother and is going to kill him. And there's this little girl that he runs into, like he is outside and his father is like hurting him, and she rushes in and like gets between him and his dad and like tries to make his dad stop him from hurting him. And her name is Becca, and from that moment it not only gives Phoenix the strength to try to get away from his father, which actually like saves his life because his father was going to kill him too, it makes him become obsessed with Becca. So for the next 15 years he watches over Becca. He also is an assassin, and he gets different jobs to do, but he specifically likes to do certain jobs where he, rescues like innocent people, especially children, from things. So this book actually starts with, we get to see a mission where he's rescuing the granddaughter of a mafia boss who his connections have gotten her into some serious situations. But he is stalking Becca, and he's stalking her in ways that are like very cute to us because we know what his heart is behind it. But once he actually starts interacting with her in real life, like we know this is going to come out, and it's not going to seem cute to her that she's being stalked by him. But I enjoyed this a good amount. I also think that and this was totally my perspective, and it's something I'm trying to work on, to not have perspectives, but I thought he was going to be more of a like scary guy. So I was expecting this to be a bit darker than it was, when actually like he's scary to his enemies, but he's just a complete cinnamon roll with her, and like their sexy time, whew, it is good. He is a very giving man, I will say that. So this was a 4 star for me, but it was a 3.5 on the spice scale. And there are trigger warnings for death, violence, and assault, and like violence to children too. So there we go. We made it through the 18 books I've read in the last 2 weeks. We will hopefully be back on track for weekly wrap-ups for the next little bit, but we'll have to see what happens. So thank you so much for watching this. Make sure to check out channel memberships and my Patreon if you're interested for early access or behind the scenes content. I already have quite a few vlogs that are up on my Patreon, and if you join, you get immediate access to everything that is on there. So that's exciting. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it, and leave me a fun emoji if you made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Bye!